still getting acquainted with this stuff. All right, so we are live
All
right
right.
now. Let's just make sure. So, any summer plans? While we're waiting?
Not anymore.
Just surviving, right?
No. Yeah. Just hanging tight. No, like literally all those things. We were, planning to go back to North Carolina, see family, friends,
Yep.
out
Done.
the window.
Yeah.
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 No, so we'll just make do around here. It seems like towards the end of summer, some things may, on the end here, start opening up. So, maybe able to look forward to, some local stuff.
Good. All right, sir. We are good to go, it looks like. So I think we'll there it is. Hold on just a second. I'm being told that there's like an echo on your end.
Yeah.
Let's see. Hold on.
What can I do?
Yeah, that's what I'm asking. Let's see. We might just get started and play with it as we go along.
Okay.
Let's just see. We got about a minute or so before this thing goes up. So. Hold on just a second. Okay, I'll be right back.
Yeah.
You know what? Actually. I'm gonna try headphones myself. Okay. Let's see if this works. Okay, can you still hear me okay?
Hear you great.
Okay, so let's get started.
All right.
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Polis Project Digital Book Salon. My name is Michael Busch. I'm the Director of Public Programs here at the Polis Project. And today we're pleased to be joined by Dr. Brandon Byrd, Assistant Professor of History at Vanderbilt University and author of The Black Republic, African Americans and the Fate of Haiti, which we're going to be discussing today. Welcome, Brandon Byrd.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Before we begin, just a note to the audience. Part of the goal here is to simulate, to the extent possible, an actual book event, which means that we want to try to, include the voices of audience members. So, as we go along, if you've got questions that you'd like asked of Dr. Byrd, we'll be happy to relate those. Just tweet them at our Twitter account, which is at project_polis. To the extent possible and time permitting, we will relay those questions to Brandon. So let's get started. As I said to you in an email earlier, the Black Republic offers such a richly textured and layered narrative that as you go along, you really begin to get the sense that it isn't a single work of history so much as it is an account that weaves together at least three different strands of historical concern. On the one hand, it's a book of American diplomatic history of the late 19th century, early 20th century. It's also a work of intellectual history looking at that period of American political thought, Black thought more particularly. And it's also a history of Black internationalism. And at the heart of the thing is Haiti, which seems to stand at a critical junction between notions of American imperialism at the time and developing ideas of race. So I'm hoping that we can begin by way of context by having you unpack this a little bit for the audience and talking about the significance of Haiti in American history from Reconstruction through the early 20th century.
Yeah. And so as I said in the email back to you, Mike, I appreciate the close reading of the book. You delved into it clearly by the nature of that question. So to just take it generally, I'm going to use the words of Rayford Logan, the towering African American historian, and in particular historian of U.S. and Haitian history. And he said that in talking about the late 19th century, he said that Haiti goes from being a pariah to a prize. And now there's some nuance to be made there for sure, especially with that notion of pariah, because that deals with the diplomatic isolation of Haiti for 6 decades of the 19th century by the United States. And as a number of scholars have shown, we got to think more about, what does that diplomatic isolation mean in relation to other forms of real exchange between Haiti and the world, right? But what Logan was really pinpointing there was the way in which Haiti, by the late 19th century into the early 20th century, really becomes to stand at the crossroads, the real center of U.S. empire. That it's at the center of U.S. imperial ambitions, military strategy, racial thinking, all of that. And it occupies a central place in American thought, as you say, that question. And it does because it's a black state in the Western Hemisphere. To take the words of Dantes Bellegarde, the towering Haitian diplomats who fretted famously, asking men what becomes of Dahomey in the middle of the Americas. Right, that it's a black state, and for all that reasons, it occupies this really important place in the U.S. and, as you say, African imaginary. For African Americans, a lot of emphasis has been placed on the importance that they ascribe to the Haitian Revolution, the celebration of that. But what I really want to do in this book is really unpack what the meaning of Haiti as a nation state, what post-revolutionary Haiti meant to them, right? What African Americans were thinking about Haiti's not only symbolism but also its geopolitical realities, how they were thinking about Haiti's place in particular at that crossroads of U.S. empire in the late 19th, early 20th century. Now, all that's a bit abstract for sure. There's a number of moments in the book where we can look at to make that a bit more concrete. Just to pull out one instance, one famous instance, period 1888, 1891, that coincides with Frederick Douglass' period of direct involvement in Haitian and U.S. relations. Right, so 1888, you have a transition of power in Haiti. There is a overthrow of the incumbent, the current Haitian president, and a fight for the Haitian presidency between Florville Hippolyte, Francois Legitime. The U.S. backs Florville Hippolyte, France backs Legitime. The U.S. in backing Hippolyte funnels arms to him. Those arms shipments come from the U.S. government. They come from the U.S. steamship operator named William Clyde. William Clyde is not only the owner of the dominant steamship operating along the U.S. Atlantic coast in the Caribbean, he is also the legal client of U.S. Secretary of Navy. So he is very involved not only U.S. capitalism, but also U.S. government circles, U.S. military circles. In funneling those arms, the U.S. expects territorial cessions from the United States. And the Haitian government probably didn't make any formal promise, but the U.S. says, we got to have this quid pro quo. In that, when Douglass goes to Haiti, he is tasked with delivering on that quote-unquote promise, famously. We can talk more about that later. But again, just to make all of what I'm saying a bit less abstract, in that episode, we see the way that the U.S. Meddles in Haitian politics in an attempt to make it part of an expanding empire of the industrialized U.S. See the ways in which African Americans are very much involved in those relations, oftentimes as diplomats. And as Douglass will say in his public defenses of Haiti after this entire episode, where Haiti ultimately refuses to back down to the U.S. African Americans and they come to some really profound understandings of the intersections of racism and imperialism and capitalism and militarism, all those things.
You know, you talk a little bit about the way in which Haiti is understood by African American politicians, public figures at the time, and there's a tension there, right? Because on the one hand, you argue that you know the country sort of offers a model of and for Republican egalitarianism, but also it represented a place that could benefit in the minds of some from American values, American economic development. You know, there's almost like a civilizing mission strain to some of the ways in which it existed in people's imaginaries. I'm wondering if you can tease out this tension and talk about the extent to which it framed both the intellectual debates as well as the policies of the time.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, there's a lot of complexities. This idea, the Black Republic, in many ways it is an idea. In many ways that language, this popular euphemism that African Americans use to talk about Haiti, it's aspirational language, that it is meant to, that idea of the Black Republic is meant to stand in for a broader idea of a Black modernity, right? So in many times it's less about, it's meant less to signal an actual, an engagement with actual Haitian politics and political structure, and is more meant to stand in for Haiti as a symbol of racial egalitarianism, of Black modernity, on a international scale that is also applicable to a more ordinary relation between Black and white. As you point out, though, that even that language, we can see the cultural biases that are imbued in it, right? Even that idea of republicanism, it should clue us into the broader cultural ideas that are influencing how African Americans are thinking about Haiti. That for the most part, a lot of the political actors, the intellectuals that I'm talking about, that they're impacted by the Victorianism, for example, of their day. That when they think about progress, they are thinking about a particular middle-class bourgeois U.S. version of progress. In many instances, these folks are not they are not cultural pluralists. You might say that there's a standard of culture, there's a standard of progress, as civilization that they believe is the standard, and that Black people are capable of possessing that standard. Right now, the difference, of course, is that white Americans, many of them would argue that they would say that yes, there is a standard of middle-class bourgeois Victorian U.S. culture, and Black people cannot meet it, especially in the late 19th century, early 20th century, when quote-unquote scientific racism has such a decided impact on white American thinking, right? So they would say Black Americans and Black people writ large cannot meet that, almost inherently cannot meet that standard. Black Americans are saying that standard is not racially exclusive. And again, this is a moment we can look at a number of different instances to see these complexities. Theophilus Gould Stewart, for example, the first AME missionary to go to Haiti in the post-Civil War era. When he goes there in 1873, he goes with a very romanticized idea of Haiti as the Black Republic, right? That romanticized idea is influenced by a family history. His grandmother had immigrated to Haiti along with thousands of other African Americans in the 1820s. She never leaves Haiti. She passes away there, but Theophilus Gould Stewart knows about her, through oral family histories. He's been given both oral and written histories of the Haitian Revolution. He says that they enamored my soul. Has that romanticized idea about Haiti and says he had always wanted to go there. Going there in 1873 was the realization of his boyhood dream. When he gets there, though, and it is a shock to him, right? And it's a shock because he was ill prepared to understand Haitians on their own terms, right? He's understanding through the lens of his upbringing in the U.S. in New Jersey as part of a middle class, educated Black American family, right? So he goes there and he's commenting on everything. The food doesn't sit right with him. The business of the marketplace in Port-au-Prince doesn't sit right with him, right? A lot of the culture, the religious culture, doesn't sit right with him. He says famously that, well, no, it's not famous. Hopefully I make it more famous. We'll see. He says that Haiti can't prosper as a civilized Black nation state so long as liquor, licentiousness, and superstition reign. Right. So, of course, he's commenting on Catholicism, on Vodou, these things that look very alien to him. Right. He's not understanding it on its own terms. Mm-hmm. There's that clash, right, between this model of the Black Republic and also how the cultural presumptions and in some cases chauvinism impacts that, and you see this real tension.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, actually, on that point, we've got a question from the audience, and the question is: when you were researching and writing this book, were you struck by, or did you notice parallels between the way in which Haiti was represented in the popular imagination in the 19th century and early 20th century, and the way it is today, or no?
Yeah, I was. One way that I was particularly struck was in sort of ordinary conversations I would have. I'll admit, so at the beginning of the book, I talk about how I came to the project really sort of late in many ways, that it was stumbling upon it when I was researching a African-American in Durham, North Carolina, the area that I'm from, and finding that this trip he took to Haiti, right? And that's really when Haiti sort of came on radar as a place of particular significance for African Americans, right? All this says I didn't grow up in, say, Boston or New York or Miami, these places where there's really more of a that are really diasporic sites, right? Mm-hmm. But as researching the book and talking to, in particular, people from these areas, both white and Black Americans, and it just seeing a sort of, say, a very sort of a present conversation about Haiti that replicated some of these previous conversations when folks would say, sort of the things like, really, Haiti? Like Haitians? And this was sort of this, I could very much hear it in their voices, the stereotypes that were coming through, right? At the same time, these may be folks, especially Black Americans, would say, yeah, Toussaint and all that, but what is there beyond that? Mm-hmm. Why? What are you trying to get at? Like, why? What would be the story with Haiti, right? And these were what I was hearing in those was a way in which the predominant popular stereotypes about Haiti in the 80s and the 90s, right, that were very much informed by this image of the AIDS crisis, of refugees and all this stuff, these very pejorative images, were clouding these histories between African Americans and Haiti and Haitians in a way that at times replicated parts of that earlier history.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Switching gears just a little bit, you devote attention in the book to the role of gender during this period of U.S.-Haiti relations, and you do so in a couple of different ways. And I wanted to start by focusing on women. A quick, gloss of this history could have you believe that, prominent men like Frederick Douglass, like Booker T. Washington, like Du Bois are the most important actors. And they are important, but you show at the exact same time that women are also critical to our understanding of this period. And they play an equally important role in the development of connections between the United States and Haiti, especially through missionary work. Can you talk a little bit more about that aspect of this history?
Yeah, yeah, and I appreciate you pulling this out. So I'm guilty at times when I talk about it, uh, really emphasizing Douglas and Du Bois, because these are people know, right? So I'm like, let's get the folks interested. Let me talk about Douglas and Du Bois, but that's not a great thing to do, right? It's not great for many reasons because, as you point out, less well-known figures are a critical part of this story, right? There's all types of thinkers and intellectuals here, and many of them are women. As you point out, in the early stages of the book, the members of the Women's Parent My Missionary Society are really, really important figures. So when the AME Church establishes missions in Haiti, really their first foreign mission field, it's the women that are doing the work, right? Benjamin Tucker Tanner, Theophilus Gould Stewart, right? They get a lot of the shine, but on the ground in Haiti, it's Mary Ellen Moselle, it's her colleagues, the Women Parent My Missionary Society, that are doing the legwork. And it's important to note they're not only doing the legwork, but they are the ones sending reports back through the Christian Recorder. They're the ones really shaping popular ideas about Haiti's importance to the race, right? And in doing so, they are, of course, positioning women as central political actors in doing that work for improving not only the material and moral condition of Haitians, but also that work of vindicating the race. And as they're doing that in their own efforts in Haiti, they're really also positioning Haitian women as being the real sort of, in some problematic ways, as being the beneficiaries of that uplift work, but also as being of particular concern for things such as, sort of basic needs, right? The essentials, food, shelter, clothing, all that type of stuff, right? So I'll say we absolutely have to position them as political actors and thinkers in this history. Beyond the Women's Parent My Missionary Society, some of my favorite stories from the book, and at times they're sort of brief stories, but in brief sort of windows into broader thinking about Haiti, outside of Douglas, Du Bois, and those famous, are actually from Black women. I'm thinking about in 1884, there's the New Orleans Exposition, one of the many international expositions in the late 19th century U.S. And there's a teacher named Sarah Shim, is one of the many African Americans who submits to the colored exhibit there, and she submits this couch, this sofa, and on the sofa she embroiders all these scenes. The scenes are from Lydia Maria Child's Freedman's book, which includes a biography of Salon. And so she gives pictures to those scenes and embroiders them on the couch. And she also puts a poem, an original poem, onto the back of that couch. Mm-hmm. And that poem is just this really profound articulation of Black nationalist sensibilities. Toussaint, the words of it, Toussaint, diadem, Haiti as the crown jewel, sea-girt island gem. And this is a sofa that gets some really significant press in the Black press as being one of the most outstanding things submitted to the colored exhibit, right? Mm-hmm. That's Sarah Shim, right, school teacher from Washington, D.C. I'm thinking, too, about, again, my other favorite stories in the book, Mariah Reddick, who is from here in Middle Tennessee. She's first born enslaved in Mississippi in the 1830s. She is brought here to one of the plantations that's now become a tourist site. Toils there until emancipation. After that, she, at the date is unclear when she makes this purchase, but she purchases a picture of Toussaint Louverture, a portrait of Toussaint Louverture, and these were for sale all across the late 19th century U.S. And she puts it in her home, right? So we got to think about that as a really profound form of self-expression of, and there's all sorts of ideas that Toussaint was tied into: Black masculinity, Black self-determination, of course, militant resistance to slavery, all these things, right? But that act of putting in her house this formerly enslaved woman who had gritted, and she, during the period of slavery, seems very clear that she had worked in the household. In this post-emancipation moment, reclaiming the house as her own space, and reclaiming it as her own space, in part by putting Toussaint Louverture, the hero of the Haitian Revolution, there. It's a really profound act, right? It's no less profound than, say, Frederick Douglass's famous speeches at the 1893 World's Fair.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I wanted to go back for a moment. You mentioned Toussaint and the notion of masculinity, and in the book you mm-hmm. spend time thinking about the way in which Haiti sort of the effect that the Haitian Revolution and Haiti as a Black Republic had on sort of the nexus between notions of masculinity, manliness, patriarchy, in other words, and race. And I'm wondering if you could sort of talk a little bit more about how Haiti affected notions of manliness and what the consequences were for the social imaginary.
Yeah, absolutely. So one thing I try to show is that African Americans are, in part, they are placing ideas and values upon Haiti. This is a dialogic relationship too, right? Mm-hmm. So it's thinking about Haiti at times through travel to Haiti, at times through interaction with Haitian thinkers, at times with interaction with just ordinary Haitians, right? That African Americans' own ideas are being reshaped, right? And these are ideas about everything from democracy, freedom, self-determination is a big one, right? But also to things like gender roles, to sexuality, to masculinity, to femininity, right? So just, you asked in particular about manliness, right? That's one of the key ideas, one of the key themes that is reshaped in this dialogic relationship, right? So at times you see in this thinking between African Americans and Haiti and Haitians, among them, you see some very militant ideas about manliness are affirmed or shaped, right? And these are ideas that look something like, sort of what we would expect, that Haiti and Haitians as being, the most assertors of Black resistance to slavery and white oppression in global history, right? That has a particular resonance and implication for how we as African Americans should think about manliness, right? Haitians in the late 19th century, what that looks like in particular, just as Haitians took a stand against slavery and refused that, we have to take a stand against white supremacy in this new moment of Jim Crow. Haitians would never be lynched. We can never be lynched. We have to resist that with all of our might, literally with arms, right? So that's a lot of times what that discourse looks like. A really profound militant assertion of a Black resistance that is also tied up into manliness, because really what they're talking about is a manly, and the word manly is all attached to it, that we have to take a manly stand against this type of degradation that's becoming more and more common with the onset of real violence, entrenched Jim Crow. But at other times, right, there's more, what I guess, to use the language of some of these speakers and political actors at the time, a more respectable, genteel form of masculinity, right? And here I'm thinking of something like some of the plays and those aspects of Black culture that emerge as sites of ideas about Haiti. Um, William Edgar Easton's play, which I talk about in the book from 1893, Dessalines, one of the early Black plays at Easton as one of the early Black playwrights. Dessalines is he, along with Toussaint, is one of the prime actors of the Haitian Revolution. In contrast, Toussaint is one of really violent and sometimes, particularly white imaginary, disreputable Blackness, right? And that's in particular due to some of the turn to despotism that he takes as the first Haitian head of state. Has to do with the way that he expelled the French population from independent Haiti, kills them. In representing his life, William Edgar Easton really turns Dessalines into what he sees as a respectable figure, a really respectable embodiment of Black masculinity. So in that play, Dessalines, the killing of the French population is absent. What is put in the place is Dessalines as a pious Christian man, as a loving husband to a woman named Clarice, who is the sister of his rival. You see him as a real, as less a forceful proponent of an independent Haiti and more of a man who certainly resists slavery, who refuses slavery, but also champions the ideas of the French Revolution. So all of that you see as, in Easton's own words, this should be a model, this sort of romanticized and reshaped and recrafted Dessalines should be a model for Black boys in particular. That this type of manhood, this type of pious Christian husband, Victorian man that I've come to Dessalines, right? This is what we need in this moment, right? As a model of manhood and racial leadership.
So we've got a lot of questions coming in from the audience, and I thought we would start, sort of including more of them in our conversation. You mentioned a moment ago sort of the brutal violence of the Jim Crow era, which is very much still alive and well today, as we saw the other day in Georgia. And one of our audience questions sort of touches on this, but asks you to sort of speak in your personal capacity, and that is, are Black scholars inherently also spokespeople for their collective history? For example, do you rethink your work as you encounter these episodes of brutal violence that Black people in the United States continue to live with? For example, the lynching in Georgia of Ahmaud Arbery.
Yeah, it's a great question. So the first thing I'll say is that it can be hard at times, particularly, and as a scholar who a lot of my work is focused on the post-emancipation era, where there's real visceral racial violence. It can be hard to encounter these archives that are not past, right? It can be hard to look at historical documents that, in many ways, are replications of like you say, the vigilante killings of black people today, right? There. So, are we back?
I think we're back. Sorry about that.
No, that's all right. So I'm not sure where we cut off.
I'm not sure either. So why don't we just begin at the start?
Yeah. So it was a great question. So I was saying that about difficulties, the challenges a lot of times of doing the type of work that a lot of Black scholars do, Black historians do, of recovering histories that are not past by any stretch, right? Histories that is certainly accumulated in our present, right? It can be difficult, right? I'll be honest, and I see that, the news out of Georgia. I didn't try to write, anything yesterday. I didn't try to write anything this morning, as more and more came out about that, because I wasn't feeling it. And a lot of my colleagues have said smarter things about this. They've read really good things about the challenges and the emotions of dealing with these archives of not only Black death and Black enslavement, but even resistance to that, right? And the difficulties of doing that. The other part of that question is about what Black scholars owe, or what our relationship is to a broader public, and in particular to a broader Black community and their communities of colors. I would say I can speak for myself. I can speak for friends and colleagues, particularly those. Shout out to folks in the African American Intellectual History Society. I would say that I absolutely feel that obligation, that relationship, right, as being absolutely essential. And that doesn't necessarily mean, I don't think it's incumbent upon every scholar to necessarily engage in activism, right? To be out on the streets, right? There may be many reasons why that may not be, part of what you see as your work, or what may be in the wheelhouse at that particular moment in time. Right? That type of thing, it requires hard work, it requires commitment, right? It's difficult, right? So, I'm not going to say that is, that you'll be out there doing it. I will say that it's great if you can, right? We need that. The community needs that. It's a beautiful act of solidarity if you're able to. What I will say, and what I do feel may be a little bit non-negotiable, is crafting a scholarship that is accountable not only to the people of the past, right, whose histories we're trying to tell, but also to how they're embodied today in the living communities that exist today, right? That we are. There has to be some accountability to them, and what that accountability may look like is things like ensuring that it reaches beyond the halls of whatever university you're at, right? That it's reaching the folks that it needs to reach, right? That when I am, for me, what that looks like is, I talked about Mariah Reddick earlier. That I've got to talk about her to Black folks in Middle Tennessee, mm-hmm. right? That's necessary, because it's not just part of something that's going to go in a book published by academic press, or that's going to stay in Vanderbilt or our quote unquote peer institutions. But there's a living history here, and again, that how I write about it has to be accountable to her community that still lives and breathes, and it also has to reach them in some form or fashion.
Right. Another audience question isn't unrelated to this, and that is, can you talk a little bit about your experiences and the encounters you have teaching Black history in the American Academy?
Yeah. Yeah. I'm trying to think how to generalize that, because it's so dependent. Mm-hmm. It's so dependent on so many different context. So teaching. I'm searching for an entryway here. Let me take it first. So I started out before coming to Vanderbilt. I was at Mississippi State, and a lot of my African American history classes that they were overwhelmingly African American, right? And Mississippi State is one of the largest black enrollments of any PWI in the U.S. And there was, I'm trying to think of a challenge there, and I can't really think of one. It was just it felt like, it felt like the type of event that's what it felt at church, whatever, and there'd be you may have or something, and mom and dad would be there. It felt really like a family conversation event, right? And so that's one experience of teaching Black history in the academy, right? Teaching Black history in classes that are not explicit about Black history, that looks different, right? Mm-hmm. Both at Mississippi State and Vanderbilt, right? When I've had classes on U.S. history that invariably, as John Hope Franklin would say, African American history.
We're back.
Yeah. All right. Sorry. I think it's something happening with the internet on my end.
Yeah, I think it seems to be, but we'll try our best.
Yeah. Let me. Okay.
You got it?
I was going to try to figure something out real quick, but.
Yeah, take your time.
Let's see. So what I was saying is, in teaching African American history in classes that are not explicitly African American history, where I've had some students who taking it because of gen ed class, that type of thing. That sure, there is, as I'm sure will not surprise a lot of folks to hear, there's absolutely resistance to it. Right, it's resistance from folks who, and we know, from studies, white American households don't talk about race same way that Black American households do, right? That there are some issues K through 12 about the teaching or lack of teaching of African American history. So a lot of times the students are just, I wouldn't say necessarily resistant to being taught African American history, but it's just not on their radar yet. So it's got to be placed there. So not to say that by the end of the course that that some of those students don't embrace having been exposed to a Frederick Douglass, for instance, right? It's also not to say that some of that resistance isn't there, right? I remember. One student, bless his heart, in one of my U.S. classes, who wore a "If at first you don't succeed, try again" shirt on multiple occasions. And of course, there was emblazoned with rebel flag on the back. I don't know what to tell you, man. I still got to do my job, and he kept coming. So I guess apparently he felt he still had to be there too. So I'll say teaching African American history in the academy. There's a gamut of experiences, particularly when teaching at the undergrad level. The experience can range from, is it being the most, just the best moments in this profession, to some of the moments that really crystallize the work that still needs to be done.
Mm-hmm. So to pivot back a little bit to the book, one of the sort of the most pivotal moments, arguably, in your narrative is the Chicago's World Fair, and the construction of the Haitian Pavilion in it. The fair in some ways is kind of like a temporal midpoint, I thought, in the narrative. And it also was as the site of Frederick Douglass's landmark speeches on Haiti. It was one of his final major public moments. The fair attracted all sorts of luminaries, from Booker T. Washington and Ida B. Wells, and in some ways it also feels like a moment in time that bridges, sort of the work and the thinking of Douglass to sort of what comes afterwards, which is really the era of Du Bois. And so I'm wondering if you could sort of talk a little bit about this moment and what what happened there and what it signified about the currents of Black political and intellectual life at the time.
Yeah, for sure. It's a huge moment. Probably could have given it more space in the book, to be honest. So the World's Fair, 1803, this is meant to be from the fair organizer. It is just this moment of celebration for the emergence of the industrialized imperial United States. In some ways, it's also meant to continue to smooth over some wounds, lingering wounds in the U.S., right? From the Civil War is not all that past, right? Of course, reunification, arguably upon a shared commitment to white supremacy, shared commitment to imperialism, right, has occurred. But at the same time, there's still disputes about immigration, about labor, right? So the event is meant to not only celebrate the United States, but also sort of bring some harmony to it in that moment. In doing so, in creating this event to celebrate the progress of the industrial imperial U.S., the fair organizers try to write African Americans out of this history of the U.S. Explicitly, African Americans, they point blank are not meant to be there. The state committees that approve exhibits, they point blank, they reject all proposals from African Americans. Now, eventually, there are some concessions made. Infamously, African Americans are given a Negro Day. This is a big point of contention amongst Black activists. Ida B. Wells says, no, we're not doing that tokenism. Eventually, the idea wins out that, Negro Day, all right, whatever. But at the same time, more importantly, it's not really concession, but the thing that makes the World's Fair really meaningful, the thing that gives a Black presence there is the Haitian Pavilion. Haiti, the pavilion stands alongside the pavilions, alongside other nation states, European nation states, South American nation states. Canada's pavilion, I believe, is pretty much adjacent to it. It's within the part of the fair that is meant to symbolize modern civilization, and the Haitian government that's responsible for funding the pavilion, they're very cognizant of that. They very much understand this as as a site, as a replication of Haitian and Black civilization, of Haitian. All right, at the pavilion, there's beautiful artwork. There's a bust of Toussaint. For sale is Haitian coffee. Haitian luminaries there, and these are very educated, eloquent, erudite men. Douglas is one of the commissioners at the Haitian pavilion. So the 27 million, I think that's the estimate of Israel. Of course, not all of them go to the Haitian pavilion, but those who go there, right, what they're seeing is a very different idea of blackness than existed in the sort of the currents of popular culture, right, minstrelsy, et cetera. Then in another part of the fair, actually, the Midway, right? The Midway, the amusement part of the fair is where you had the other sort of stereotypes about blackness, where you had the Dahomey village, right? We have to have a conversation about how the Africans, the Dahomeyans, who went to that village, how they saw themselves, but very clear to the fair organizers, the Dahomey village, right, was meant to be very much a stereotype of Black backwardness, of Black submission, right, of a contrast to white modernity, right? So the Haitian pavilion to the Haitian government, also to many African Americans, gives a very different representation of blackness. Ida B. Wells will call it one of the gems of the fair. In Douglas, he gives a speech at the opening as one of the commissioners of one of Haiti's commissioners of the World Fair. He gives a speech at his opening. The speech that gets cited the most, and that I spend the most time on the book, actually occurs at Quinn's Chapel after the dedication of the fair. Quinn's Chapel was an African Methodist Episcopal church, one of the prominent ones. It may be the oldest one in Chicago. There's thousands of African Americans there out to hear Douglas speak about Haiti, and he just gives this resounding vindication of Haiti and its meaning to the Black world. He calls it the North Star, will forever stand in the firmament of nations, right? And of course, that is some loaded imagery for the formerly enslaved Douglas to call this Black nation state the North Star, to lead Black Americans in this era of Jim Crow to freedom, to lead the Black world in this era of imperialism. Remember, this is after the European partitioning of Africa has occurred. Right, so to call it a North Star is clearly meant to invoke its sort of singularity as a symbol, and a real, not only just symbol, but a real bastion of Black independence.
Mm-hmm. We've got another audience question here, and this is, it reads, I was fascinated by your discussion of the importance of the post-emancipation era for Black internationalism. Why do you think this era has been overlooked in the historical literature on Black internationalism?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I think part of it is that there is, so in the book I make an argument that there are currents of Black internationalism that we have to trace back to the late 19th century. That's evident in somebody like, let's just think about, right? We have to trace these currents back. With that said, though, it's certainly, I think part of the interest in the forms of internationalism has to do with the greater organizational. The part of the interest in the iterations of Black internationalism that emerge, say, between World War I and World War II, have to do with, one, the greater organizational structure to some of the Black internationalists' work in that era, right? You have to think about the African Blood Brotherhood. You think about, of course, the UNIA. So that's part of it. Part of it is that this is an international moment, right, that spans beyond even the Black world, right? This is the era of the Communist International. It's the era where you have real sort of new emergent solidarities between, say, a British working class, potentially who's interested in Indian decolonization, these sorts of things, right? So I think that's part of it too. The other part too is that interest in in particular, the radical bent to a lot of the internationalism, particularly as it's influenced by Marxism and Black Marxism, right? So all of that, I get for sure, right? But tracing strands of internationalist thought back to the 19th century, I would argue, really encouraged us to think about and reshapes our thinking about how we get to these other moments of internationalist thought. For somebody like Du Bois, for example, who I end the book with, he is shaped by, when he's thinking about the U.S. occupation of Haiti, and he is drawing broader lessons about racism and capitalism, imperialism, right? As he's building a more radical internationalist thought in that moment, he is clearly influenced by that moment, right? And he's influenced by Haitian thinkers in that moment. But what he's also influenced by is this longer accumulation of thinking about Haiti that's been ongoing for decades and decades and decades, right? I've been kicking myself, honestly, since the book came out for not including this. I honestly don't know why, but one piece of this argument about accumulation, right? Du Bois hears Douglass speak about Haiti when Du Bois is when he's at Harvard. Okay, it's that type of linkages. It's that type of accumulation that helps us get and helps us think about these later strands of internationalism that have gotten a little bit more play in the scholarship.
Great. We're running a little bit low on time, so I want to begin to wrap it up. But before we do, I want to focus on Du Bois a little bit more, because, as you say, he sort of closes out the book and is obviously sort of a towering figure in this broader intellectual trend. And you note that that his thinking on Haiti changed dramatically over the years, and that the American occupation of Haiti was a sort of a signal and turning point for him, and ultimately sort of ushers in his brand of kind of radical Black internationalism. And I'm wondering, that the occupation of Haiti is not something that many people talk about, and a lot of Americans aren't really aware of. I'm wondering if you can speak about that moment and sort of what it did to Du Bois's meditations and considerations on his feelings about Haiti.
Yeah, absolutely. So there can be a penchant. I think this is part of how we have to think about how our present is so wrapped up into the past, right? Particularly in our present of unending wars, right? Where there can be this penchant of, when you have just unending wars and wars that are exported when they're only fought abroad, that they just pass out of a popular imaginary. They become things that, Afghans have to think about, or Iraqis have to think about, right? But we only think about it when we are having a military flyover before, whatever sporting event, right? And that's the only time, right? Thank you for your service. That's it. But these external wars, both now and then, they of course have a monumental and devastating impact in the places that they're fought, but they also have a incredible impact at home, on the home front, right? And we see that in the case of Du Bois, right? That the U.S. occupation, again, one of these wars that is exported, right? And it becomes, I should say, like this occupation becomes a war because Haitians rise up against it, by the thousands, right? This is something that the U.S. goes thinking that they're going to, essentially, they're going to teach Haitians, right? They're going to teach them about democracy. They're going to teach them about progressive values. But ultimately what ends up happening is that Haitian resistance really becomes a site of instruction for, certainly some white liberals, right? Certainly some, white leftists, but in particular for black intellectuals, particularly for black thinkers like Du Bois, right? They draw some really profound lessons from it. So at the beginning of the occupation, Du Bois, like a number of other black thinkers, including those in the black press, really, buys in somewhat to the idea that, maybe U.S. intervention can bring some value to Haitians, right? Maybe it can give them good governance. Maybe it can, quote unquote, stabilize Haiti. And we should say here that part of the reason why Haitian governance was in a state of flux was because of the way that the U.S. and other international powers had meddled in Haitian politics, right? So Du Bois buys into this idea that intervention can be a good thing. He begins to see, certainly by 1918, by 1919, that there's just no way. This is a racist, that is an occupation that began because U.S. Secretary of State, because U.S. President Woodrow Wilson, people can't govern them, cannot govern themselves. It began because the U.S. military feared a German incursion in the Caribbean and wanted a coaling station in Haiti. It began because the National City Bank of New York had a controlling interest in the National Bank of Haiti, right? It began because of all of these connections between U.S. Strategy, U.S. militarism, U.S. imperialism, racism. He really, listen, that's what's going on. And out of that, you can't have any good. And this is something that he gains, these insights he gains from, again, Haitian thinkers. These are Haitian journalists. Alonzo P. Holly, the son of an African-American immigrant to Haiti. He learns them from Haitian members of the UNIA. He learns it from Dantes Bellegarde, right, that famous Haitian diplomat. He learns it from investigations in occupied Haiti. He draws all these lessons from a place that, again, was supposed to be the beneficiary of U.S. tutelage, that ends up providing these real insights that are a real cornerstone of a real radical black internationalism.
So we're just about out of time. I wanted to just thank you again so much, Brandon Byrd, for joining us today to talk about your excellent book. I can't recommend it highly enough, The Black Republic, African Americans and the Fate of Haiti, published by the University of Pennsylvania Press. You can purchase your copy at penpress.org. Brandon, thanks again so much, and we'll hope to see you again soon.
All right. Thank you for your time.
All right. Thank you, sir. Bye.
All right.